Welcome to I Could Never, a podcast about non-monogamy and the many ways it can look. I'm Genevieve from Chill Polyamory on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. And I'm joined as always by my co-host and partner, Ishik.
Hey. Hope everyone's having a wonderful day.
And we are joined today by Jaime Gama, aka Gotitas de Poliamor on Instagram and Amemos Eticamente on TikTok. Did I say that okay?
That was perfect. The best I've heard so far internationally. So, yay. Thank
you. Jaime is a non-monogamous psychotherapist based in Mexico City. Jaime, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm so excited. I love your content. You have no idea. Besides the fact that it's amazing information, your voice is so calming.
Aww.
It's just so good.
Hey.
Well, I know I'm personally super excited to get to know you more and dive into not only your personal experiences, but also some of your expertise as a psychotherapist. But before we get into all of that, we like to start each episode with a segment we call Vibe or Vent. Essentially, there are a lot of great things in our life that we love to celebrate and vibe about. Also, a lot of bad stuff in the world that sometimes we need to vent about and, get off our chest. So, personally, today, I'm going to be vibing.
What are you vibing on, baby?
I am feeling really good. I'm feeling really excited. Obviously, we are working together on the podcast, but we've also started working more together on a few other creative endeavors, specifically the part that I'm really most excited about, this media analysis stuff that's going out on YouTube. All these different interesting representations of non-monogamy in media, because I think so often it's just a lot of sex focused, or it's Mormonism, I think, is another, just like, or like, kind of religious polygamy. So yeah, no, it's just really nice to see all this interesting stuff, not only how it can look really beautiful, but how it can be messy too, just like any relationship. And so it's just been really fun to do that with you. It's been really exciting.
Yeah, it's fun to work on and think about different examples. Yeah. Well, I'm actually wanting to vent today. Specifically like how tech companies are pretty unreliable and untrustworthy. The news just came out today that TikTok is losing a lot of its rights to music. As of at least a recording, it'll be February 1st when all of Universal Media Group is just pulling all of their songs. And overnight, a lot of people's videos will just become silent.
Wow.
And I'm not even like personally, I don't know if you are either, Jaime, like affected by it because
Not really.
yeah, we use, but it's more about just the power that companies have that like so every small business is on social media. It is people's marketing arm, we are what makes platforms, and so it's not just about creators, it's about like people's personal lives, their livelihood, sometimes their personal safety depends on these platforms. And just overnight, they can make a change that affects a lot of people because two companies are fighting. So yeah, I think if there's anything to vent about, it's about companies with some unchecked power. Anyway, that's what's on my mind. Jaime, do you have something on your mind that you're either really happy about or annoyed about?
Yeah, I'm just thinking like I have both. Do I have to choose or can I do
You can
both?
do both.
Yeah, you can do both.
Because that's who I am. I'm vibing because one, my birthday's tomorrow.
Oh
my God, happy birthday tomorrow.
Thank you. And tomorrow I'm going to start writing my book. I just got signed by Random Penguin House.
That's so exciting. What's your book on?
This.
Yeah.
Just polyamory, relationships, just all of those things. And the thing I would like to vent about is like my long distance partner's boss just told him he cannot work remotely anymore. It's just the idea of him not being able to visit makes it really complicated. So
yeah, another way that like a company can just change people's lives on a whim.
Exactly, that's what it is. People who have no regard for people's lives.
Yeah. Well, we do want to dive into the topic and maybe doing a preview a little bit of what's in your book.
Actually, very likely.
Yeah, so I'd love to share with people a little bit more about you. You described yourself as a non-monogamous person in a polyamorous relationship. That's right?
Correct. I've never identified as polyamorous ever, and people just freak out when I say it. I am in a polyamorous relationship because I wanted to explore it. My nesting partner has always been polyamorous, and I wasn't really into exploring it when I met him. I said, I want to be monogamous. Polyamory doesn't work. It's stupid. So if you want someone like that, find someone else. And here we are. But eventually, I started getting very curious that I wanted to try it. Not because it was part of me. It was more like, I don't know if I can do this or if I want to do this, but I'm very kinky, and monogamy is not very compatible with kink a lot of the time, or my kinks at least. I don't feel like I fit in polyamory, but I don't fit in monogamy. I like exploring different relationships. I like having ethical relationships. I don't have to have them, and I don't feel constrained by having only one partner.
You mentioned like sometimes people get upset. What kinds of pushback do people have when you describe that it's not a part of your identity?
So I have a thing with labels. I love labels. I think we need labels to find our people. If I tell you that I am a cisgender gay man who is into this specific kink and I am non-monogamous, and you're looking for someone that is not that, it helps us just not, waste our times. I think a lot of the times what people, they have a different idea of what that means, and they don't stop to ask me what that means to me. Like people just give me like, but you are polyamorous. And I'm like, no, I'm in a polyamorous relationship. And I give them the comparison of, if I cook, I'm not a chef. Like it's not my career, it's not what I do. I can cook, but I don't identify as a chef. I'm a teacher. I've taught for 20 years. That's part of who I am. I like teaching people. I like exploring things. And the thing with labels is, as long as the people involved in the relationship agree on that meaning, nothing else matters. But people have issues trying to understand other, like not even trying to understand other people's labels, I think.
So, for the listeners to get a better sense, can you describe a little bit about what your non monogamous relationships look like right now?
Yes, I have a nesting partner. We've been together for 10 years. We've been polyamorous for like 6, I think. We were monogamous for the first like year and a half. And I was like, let's explore other things. And he's an angel. Like he's literally one of the most amazing people I've ever met. He's just so caring and loving and just, it's amazing. At the moment, I have a long distance partner. We met a year ago and we share very specific kinks. And I was like, oh, I want to explore this because my nesting partner is very non-kinky. So I was like, well, that's fine. We can play with other people. And I also have I call him a satellite partner, but it's not a romantic relationship. It's a kinky relationship. And I see him like every 3 months, something like that. So that's basically my structure at the moment.
You dropped the term satellite partner, satellite relationship. Would you be willing to dive in a little bit about how you would define that?
Yeah, I don't like the primary, secondary, tertiary terms. They always give me a lot of trouble. A, because I'm autistic and I can't make hierarchies. It's really hard. And B, I just have a lot of ethical issues with that. So the other thing, which I personally call cosmic polyamory, because I like the idea, is the nesting partner, the one where your lives are entangled, which is more traditionally what a partner would look like in monogamy. The satellite partner is someone who is orbiting your life. Like he's not as entangled, but he's part of your system. He's part of where you are. And then there's the comet, right? That comes like every now and then. When they come, it's amazing. It's a party, and they leave, and that's okay. So for me, the difference I always give between anchor partner or nesting partner, if you live together, and satellite is, I consider anchors in my life decisions. So if I'm going to move to another country, if I'm going to change my job, all those things that are going to change my life, I always talk to my anchor partners. Hey, this is going to happen, and this is how it might affect you. Let's talk about this. A satellite, I would share it. Oh, this is happening. I'm so excited.
I think it's really beautiful, like the metaphorical language being used to replace the ranking language.
Yeah, so much.
Yeah, like cosmic language of, or in the sea, anchors. You can have multiple anchors in different ports. It doesn't imply one's above another.
Exactly.
I think that that can be a really beautiful way and also a bit of a shorthand, going back to labels, to make it accessible to people where it's like a new concept. Like, oh, well, I can accept that there's a lot of stars in the sky, So.
Yes.
So yeah, so when people start out monogamous, open, and they're still with their partner, I always want to know, how'd you do it? What was that like? So can you walk us through a little bit about, the thought process, the conversations, like how did you go from closed to open?
I mean, we really started opening up like 8 years ago. Polyamory was more present like 6 years ago, I'm going to say. When I met him, I had just come out of a relationship that had been just very complicated. I was a little done. I was like, I just want to be happy and I had to put myself first. And I started making a list of my perfect partner. And when I met Marco, he was all of those things. And I was really impressed. And then when he said, oh, but I'm polyamorous, I'm like, of course, something had to not work. And I said, you know what, at this point in my life, I really don't want to try polyamory. I've seen it, I've studied it, interviewed people. I don't want to try it. If you want polyamory, that's perfectly fine. You need to find someone else. I am not your person. I want a monogamous relationship. And then he said, no, I want to try, I can be monogamous with you. I can just choose to be just with you. And I said, okay, if at any point this changes, we need to talk about it. And that's okay. So he was choosing having only me as a partner. And that choice can change, which is what people I think don't consider. Eventually, I started thinking about exploring my sexuality more because I was very not sexual for such a long time. There was a lot I didn't explore. We opened the relationship a little bit, so we would be with other people, but only together. Up until the point when we met this one person, and it was just supposed to be like a hookup, and it was great. Then a week later, he came back for another hookup, and then it happened again, and then again, and then again, and then 3 months later, it's still happening. He's staying over, and I'm like, oh, okay, I don't know what's happening. And I told them both, and I'm not proud of this. I didn't know better. I told them both, if any of us falls in love, this stops. Because I don't want polyamory. So this is good as a sexual thing, but if you fall in love with us or we fall in love with you, I don't want that. This stops. Which made a huge mess. What's funny is that one day, Marco, I remember Sunday morning, he told me, you do realize you're in love with this person, right? And I'm like, no, me? No, I don't do that. And then we started talking. I'm like, oh, I am in love with him. Damn it.
Obviously you are creating content online about non-monogamy. Clearly you're very open beyond just like your personal circles. Did you have any types of like reactions from family members or friends who are monogamous, or like was there any feedback or pushback, or did you get a lot of support?
At the beginning, I started dating someone and it got serious. And then I said, I have to tell my family. I'm not a big family person, but if there's something big, I want him to come as well. So this one time I had lunch with my mother, my brother, my sister, and her children. And I said, so I talked to her about something. And I explained more or less what it was. And my mother said, yeah, on Facebook, I saw you with this other person. So I just assumed. I was like, well, okay, that works. And then the next time I saw them, I went with my partners. And it was really funny because my nephew, he was just staring at me and he goes, Uncle, do you love him? Pointing to Marco. And I was like, yes, I love him very much. And then he pointed to my other partner. He's like, do you love him? And I'm like, yes, I love him very much. And then he goes, are you getting married?
Aw.
And I said, nope, I don't want to get married. He's like, okay. That was it. So that's mostly the reaction that I got from a lot of people. Again, I have the privilege of being a cisgender gay man who is independent and I work for myself. So nothing that I do depends on my relationship model. So I'm very open about it because if you don't like it, that's okay. You don't have to connect with me. We don't have to be in the same circles. But not everybody has that privilege. I had this client once. She was 18 and she said that she wanted to do what I do. She said, I'm just going to come out as polyamorous and as bisexual to my family and the world. And I was like, you are 18. You don't have a job. You don't have people who can support you. Your family is very religious. You live in a country that's very religious and you're in a small town. If you do this, your well-being is at risk. Maybe your life will be at risk. Yes, to being true to yourself, but I also want you to be alive. So maybe start working towards a system that makes things better for you.
Yeah, I mean, that does answer my question of like, because it is such a luxury to be able to share openly about anything non-normative that you're doing, right?
It is.
It was even a luxury, like, once I started getting heavily tattooed, I waited until I was, like, certain that I could self-employ. Um, let alone coming out as queer and then non-monogamous, yeah, and so to be really thoughtful of, like, and risk aware of the, systems at play, social and institutional, that could put up some barriers.
Yeah.
So my question was gonna be, like, with people that you talk to who don't have as much of a strong support, what do you recommend? It sounds like really being thoughtful about creating some like self-protective measures. Do you have any thoughts for people who maybe are in a more conservative environment or their family doesn't approve or their friends are well-meaning and give them terrible advice? What do you say to that person who's like, I don't have any support?
It's very unlikely that there's zero people around you who want to support you. It's very unlikely. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. I'm sure it happens. But maybe it's that one person that starts by saying, I don't understand it, but I'm here for you. Go to that one and start building that relationship with other people who will support you. I did my research for my master's thesis was about polyamory and gay men and masculinity. And what I found was that the most important indicator of gay men who want to explore monogamy in a non-hierarchical way was community. If they, it didn't matter a lot if like they felt more confident or if they looked a certain way or they had partners or not, or it was just community. If I feel accepted, if I feel like someone has my back or at least someone understands me, that's basically all I need to start. So for me, that's the first thing. Find your people, start building a support network, and then talk about coming out.
I do have so many questions about your master's thesis that you mentioned. But to continue with that thought, though, to start with who you feel you can trust, who is well intentioned, even if they don't understand. I think one of the beautiful things about having such international access to people is that there are so many online spaces where people
Yeah.
coexist. A lot of them are very messy. A lot of like Reddit spaces or Facebook groups, I'm like, enter, also risk aware. They might tell you
Yes,
terrible
please.
advice. And
Yes.
I've seen people even in like my own Instagram posts, like in the comment section, start to support each other and then maybe direct message each other and become friends that way. And so like even if there's not a polyamorous meetup or something like that, which most major cities do have them, if there are at least one person online who you think gets it and you could text when you're having a bad day because they're looking for you too. They also need support.
Exactly. We're looking for each other. That's what people don't understand. Like all of us need support desperately.
Yeah, to take that leap of faith, because why not, right? It can start that small. That community is built. It is not necessarily just found.
I can't help it anymore. I have to ask more about your master's thesis. If I heard you correctly, you said it was polyamory amongst. Go
So
ahead. What
What was your
hit
master's
us with the
thesis?
title?
so basically my master's was finding out what helps gay cisgender men who identify as polyamorous to have a successful happy polyamorous relationship, like what gets in the way. My hypothesis was that masculinity made it really hard for them to actually create a non-hierarchical polyamorous relationship, because like even as gay men who are monogamous, we very often fighting to see who is the man of the house. So having a lot of men together, I was thinking there's going to be a lot of masculinity issues of who is the alpha dog and who is not. Like, I wanted to know what affected their happiness in polyamorous relationships with my idea that was masculinity, but it was more community.
Mhm.
That's really interesting. And I mean, there's so much complexity in that, like the intersectionality of non-monogamy, masculinity, and homosexuality, sexuality in general.
Yeah.
When we're talking about masculinity, definitions of masculinity are not only personal to every individual person, but also are really shaped by time periods.
Yeah.
Culture to culture can be really different. Like I know growing up, I'm half Turkish. My father's Turkish, and so I would be in Turkey with him, and I would see him being very much a man's man, quote unquote, right?
Mm-hmm.
While still engaging in Turkish cultural practices, right? So more specifically, like he would go to events and dance, almost like be belly dancing, right? And that was like perfectly normal, even laudable. He was seen as like oh, look at this guy, he's so confident, what a confident dancer, right? And then I would go back as a kid and talk to other children in American schools and say, oh yeah, my dad is a great belly dancer, and I would get mocked incessantly
Yeah.
for that and say that that's like a feminine thing to do. So I think, was there any exploration of those kinds of cultural distinctions of masculinity in your thesis?
Yeah, I was just focused on Mexicans, like Mexican men from Mexico City in a very specific economic bracket. The expectations of a Mexican macho man, mostly it would be characteristics of dominance, of power, of also not being vulnerable, but being more independent. Like all those things that basically is disconnecting from who I am and from who I want to be with. Because a masculine man doesn't need anybody or anything. That's the concept that I have for that type of masculinity.
It's funny too that that's the framework that's being explored. I've seen some of your content online, right? And I've definitely seen featured pretty prominently in the backgrounds of a lot of your videos are a lot of like Sailor Moon and like magical girl anime stuff.
No.
No, what? And
As he sips from his Sailor Moon cup.
but I will say that I think it's pretty fair to say that the genre, the magical girl genre, is pretty feminine coded.
Yeah.
And I think it's, a common experience for a lot of men and boys to be told that liking feminine things is like quote unquote gay, right? Did you have a lot of that experience? Is that something that you had growing up as well? And do you feel like your appreciation today for more feminine media or aesthetics is in any way tied to your sexuality? Or do you feel like these are totally separate things, that like you are a gay man and then separately you like this other stuff?
Yeah, I love magical girl stuff, especially Sailor Moon. I have all these collectible things, and when I was little, I really, really wanted them, but it's for girls. So this one time, I remember I told my mother finally, like, I want one of these like little houses with Sailor Moon characters, and I got it, and I had it in my room. And anytime my friends came over, I would take it to my sister's room, and then when they were gone, I would take it back. And this one time, I forgot to take it to my sister's room, and my friend comes over and is like, "What is this?" And I said, "Oh, it's my sister's." And my sister, who's a smartass, she was like, "Yes, it is. I want to play with it." And I'm like, "No, remember you're grounded. You can't play with that specific toy." So that was like me trying to hide it all the time. And the first time I told my mother I want to play with one of those, I was so nervous. I was like, she's gonna think I'm gay. She'll think I'm wrong. And then I went over. I said, "I like that doll." And my mom was like, "I know what you're gonna say." And I was like, "Fuck." And then she said, "You're in love with Sailor Moon." I was like, "Yep,
Yep.
yep, that's what it is."
Super attracted to her.
Yeah, it's like she's so hot. Oh my god! It's not that I want to be her, but yeah.
Mm.
So I got by like doing those kind of things as I was growing up. But I do think that as queer people, LGBTQ plus people, we don't fit in the vanilla heterosexual monogamous world. And that opens up the possibility of saying, well, I'm already coming out as gay. Half my family is not going to talk to me anymore already, and people are going to bully me because I like having sex with men. I might as well just see what else I like. And then little by little, I got to explore. Right now, I get my nails done, and I haven't had like undone nails in like 3 years. When I can, I let myself explore more. I'm already non-conforming, so might as well do my nails.
Yeah.
I do hate to totally shift topics off of this right now, but I'm going to, because you did bring up kink a number of times, and it was something that I wanted to ask more about, because obviously a lot of gay or just generally queer communities have a lot of overlap with kink.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people can begin their exploration of non-monogamy through kink spaces. I know, myself included, right? So when you were first exploring, or even today, how do you see there being a link between your exploration of kink and your exploration of non-monogamy?
Oh, no, absolutely. It's so linked. It's the first time I went to a kink event was 2 years ago in LA. And I had just come out of a very abusive relationship, and it was very connected to part of my identity. And I was very broken. So I get to this place, and there's this hotel full of people, of kinksters, and I'm on my own. Suddenly, someone starts talking to me, and they are accepting, so accepting. And there's this culture of consent. I remember the person who's now the satellite person. I met him that day. At one point, he texted me and said, "Hey, do you want to come up for cuddles? Just cuddles." And I was like, "Please, I know what that means." And I was very not in a sexual place. So I go up to his room, and I open the door, and I see him in bed, and he's like, "Come over." So I lay on his stomach, and he starts just like doing this to my head and just touching my arms very nicely, very non-sexual in a traditional way, for like an hour and a half. I was in heaven.
Mm.
And then he said, "And I want you to know that I don't need sex as payment for this. If you want this, you will get it from me." It blew my mind. So I started to meet more people. And then this specific person, he has a polycule of like 15 people.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and I'm part of that now. But when I met them all, he has this huge like living room with a huge couch. And I get there at one point, and it's his husband and his boyfriend and his boyfriend's boyfriend and this other person. And they're all connected in many ways. And there I am, being my small self. And I'm just looking at them. And I fall asleep. And when I woke up, they were all looking at me. And I was like, what did I do? And they're like, oh, you're just very cute when you sleep.
Aw.
And I was like, I feel so safe in this environment to explore who I am. Because everything is upfront, everything is verbal, everything is explicit. For a non-monogamous relationship to be functional, you need a lot of that. Nothing can be implicit. You can't assume anything. All the agreements have to be talked about and reviewed and revised all the time. Consent is very important. There's steps to all these things. And if I'm conscious and aware and I consider you, it's just a very safe space.
Yeah, that's so awesome. And I agree completely. The deliberateness with which people approach any kind of relationships in kink is super, like, it can just transfer over so well to any kind of a non-monogamy context
Yeah.
that there's no assumptions.
Oh, yes, it's incredible.
It's one of the biggest things that makes me feel so tied to the kink community. Even when I'm not actively participating in kink activities, you know, it still feels like a big part of me, because that's where those habits and those patterns of being really communicative about any kind of sexual, romantic, emotional connection, that was born from that place. And I practice it every day now in all of my relationships. So
Yeah, I think one thing that, like, I don't know if you get this reaction if you talk about going to a kink space or some kind of like kink plus sexual environment, how wholesome they are. But then, like, people who aren't in that world will just, like, make it so scandalous, and I'm like, "But it's cute," like you're saying, like, there's like, saying how cute you are when you sleep, and that there's no shoulds, like, you don't have to do anything, you can show up and have a snack and hang out by the wall and, like, just talk with other like-minded people and or participate in some parts of sensuality, and it doesn't have to be on this escalator of, like, "Well, we're cuddling, that has to lead to, oh, wait, no, it can just be cuddling? Oh, wait, this is nice. Maybe I can relax." And, there's no obligation and how relieving it is when there's no shoulds or musts. And I think that's also how we can, spot people in polyamorous spaces, but also in kink spaces that if they're saying, you should be comfortable with this or hurry up and get with it. Like if you're going to be good at kink or good at polyamory, you should this or that. That's, I'm like, this is the inverse of what we're supposed to have happen. So, little flag there of rushing people or forcing people. Yeah.
Huge red flag.
There's so much conversation around how we frame sex and what import we put on sex and what message we take away. Like if they're having sex with someone else, then what? What does that say about me? What does that say about us? My desirability, our stability,
Yeah, I have a story about that. So my first boyfriend in a polyamorous relationship, he had a lot of friends he had sex with, and I did not understand it. And then I said, I need you to explain what that looks like, because I don't know what that is. And he's like, well, they're my friends. We hang out, we go see movies, we play games, we have sex. I love them. And I was like, that's a boyfriend. I'm sorry, but all of those things you do with me, so they're your boyfriends. And he was like, no, it's a different relationship. It may look similar, but it's not the same. And I said, I don't want you to tell me anything about these people. I don't want to know their names, their faces, nothing. And he said, okay. So then one day we go to the gym, and as we're leaving the gym, this person, really like muscular, manly, handsome man, comes up to him. He's like, hey, how are you? I haven't seen you in a while. And my ex just freezes. And I'm like, what is happening? And then I introduce myself. We leave. We're in the car. And I say, what was that? And then he goes, I don't know what to do. So I either lie to you or I break our agreement. And I didn't realize that I put him in that position because that was one of his sex friends. And he didn't have a choice. He had to be dishonest with me either way. And I realized that there's a different conversation, which is this, like, what is sex to you? How do you live that sexual life, that connection? And I don't understand it. So I need you to explain it to me, because I've never lived a life where sex is allowed between friends. It's only for partners. So I need to understand your world because it's not mine. I'm looking at your world from my glasses, and that's very threatening because if I did it, it would be a partner.
Did you feel like you were able to get to a different perspective with
Yeah,
him?
no, totally. It was beautiful work. It was so much with him. He's was again amazing, wonderful. What we did is I started exploring that with him, like just learning the way he connected sexually with people who were not romantically involved with him. And then I was like, I want to try it, but I am afraid I don't know how to do it. And then I tried it, and then I was like, I get it. I understand. I'm not a big fan. I don't necessarily like do it all the time, but now I know what your world is like. It still takes a little time, but yeah, I think I understand it better now.
There is a person I'm close to who feels describes themselves as demisexual, that it really has to be emotionally significant for them to desire sex. And one of their partners views sex and experiences sex more as like a sport. Whereas like we're gonna go play a game together for a few hours and I'm gonna come back. It's like that carefree and that playful and doesn't have to carry that weight. And she said once she started seeing it as like, oh, they're going to go, play soccer together, like, and it kind of even made when she was visualizing, like, because those intrusive thoughts where you can't get the image out of your head, she was like, that actually was less threatening to me when I started to understand how they are approaching it, even though that would not be how I approach it.
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think this is really integral work in non-monogamy is this question of what does sex mean? What significance do I feel it has? It's really complex work that can't happen quickly.
Yeah. In my case, I've always had an issue with jealousy. Yes, I'm in a polyamorous relationship, but I'm jealous. I explore it. I work in it with it through therapy. But it's a process because like I think everybody talks about that. Like that's the first thing people put like as a question. It's like, but what about jealousy? And that was my question too. I had experienced jealousy as something that A, I'm not supposed to feel. B, if I feel it, I have to push it away immediately or make it go away somehow. I did this workshop and this article about how jealousy is my friend, a very annoying friend. I hate him. When I don't listen to them, they will just insist and scream at me, and I'll be very uncomfortable.
Since jealousy is such an umbrella term that can cover like fear, insecurity, anger, grief, how would you say that those tensions have been coming up for you? Like, what sub feelings have been encompassed in the jealousy, and is it different than it used to be?
So when Marco went out for the first time with someone, it destroyed me. He walked out the door, and I started crying and crying for like 2 hours, and I could not stop. I felt like the world had ended. And when he came back, I was like, I can't do this. If I'm gonna feel this every time you leave, I can't do it. But in my very particular case, I realized that my jealousy comes from a fear of disappearing. So in my head, my problem is if you go with someone else, you'll forget that I exist. And that's terrifying for me, which also stems from my own experience because as an ADHD autistic person, my emotional and object permanence are very, very fragile. So if I don't see you, you don't exist. And I don't want that to happen to you about me. And once I understood that, I was like, I don't care so much that you share some things with this person sexually, romantically, or something, as long as I feel secure that I don't disappear for you. Because it doesn't make me mad. It doesn't make me sad. I'm not frustrated. I'm not envious. I'm just very scared. When I understood that, most of my jealousy work with my partners is focused on that specific thing. Whenever you do this thing, I need some sign that I haven't disappeared from your life.
I love that in getting more specific about what's behind the jealousy, now you have something actionable. Like now that I know that this thing specifically is what I need some care and reassurance around, and then it becomes a bit less of like this daunting, how do I just stop being jealous? No, how do I get reminded that I'm safe and not disappearing? Yeah.
I mean, yeah, one of the things that, jumps out very clearly was that there was an internal experience that you were having, that was the genesis of those feelings of jealousy. And then there was maybe some action that they were taking that was triggering those internal feelings.
Mhm.
But then when it came time to find a solution for that jealousy, or a way to cope with it, it wasn't your fault or their fault. It was, how do we do this together, right? And so I think for people who have that impression of it's either their partner's fault or their meta's fault or entirely their own responsibility, and they're really stuck in that kind of binary thinking, do you have any suggestions about how to help get to a more collaborative teamwork approach to resolving jealousy?
Yeah, there's a few things that I usually say. The first thing comes to my mind when you say, like, it's all my responsibility. I should not be feeling jealous. I should be more independent. I don't know. And when I go to that point, I remind myself that if it really was entirely my responsibility, I would have fixed it already because I would have that much power, which is also very absurd. I don't have enough power in my relationship to actually control the entire thing so that everything is about me. So that relaxes me a little bit, saying, okay, it's not just about me. My partner is contributing to this in some way. The second part is knowing that being careful with attacking verbally my partner. There's people who think that violent communication is always like yelling or insulting, and a lot of violent communication comes from interpretation or blaming, and it's just part of the language in a way that they didn't even notice. So the first time that Marco was late, we weren't even open. He was late to come home. I was, again, in my head, I was like, he had sex with someone. And it's just, I was going crazy. He walked in the door. He said, how are you? And I'm like, I'm not well. I am not well. And I want to ask you for help to process this. But the first thing I want to tell you is, one, this is not about you. Two, at the moment, I don't care what happened. If it did or did not, will not change my feelings at the moment. Three, I am not blaming you. And it's very important for me that you don't feel blamed or held responsible for my feelings at this moment. If you can do this, I would like you to listen to me and hear what I need from you at the moment. If you cannot, that's perfectly fine, and regulate myself until we can talk about it. And he said, I can do that. What's wrong? And I started crying. And I was like, I think you slept with someone and you betrayed me and you don't like me. And I just went all in. And because he knew that I wasn't blaming him, I wasn't saying that he was an unfaithful bastard who was just betraying me. It's my feelings, it's my head. He was able to sit with me and just see the movie with me and just go, I understand why you feel this way. I get it. That moment of empathy always brings me back to reality. But I think that a lot of the times, me presenting my feelings to you without being careful of my narrative, especially because we tend to just like blame each other, and that's just the way we communicate. When I tell you what I'm feeling, and I don't consider how you're feeling about my feelings, then it escalates and explodes.
I love that, like, sort of distinguishing the story that your brain is telling you,
Yeah.
which may or may not, like, which it seems to be up for debate hugely. We need everybody's input before we land on what actually is true. But yeah, also distinguishing that from the emotions, which are very real,
Yeah.
and separating those consciously stops from feeling like you're blaming.
Mhm.
Like, my mind is telling me you did this and that and that. Even just like that small rhetorical like framing can make someone less defensive
Mhm.
and on your team, stay on your team. So it's the two of you versus the problem rather than versus each other.
Mhm. It sounds simple,
Yeah.
but in the heat of the moment, it's really hard, and I can't always do it. When I'm not in that conflict, I talk to my partners, and I'm like, when I feel this way, I don't think you would hurt me. Like I always go from the standard of good faith. I don't think my partners want to hurt me ever. They will, and they do. There's mistakes, there's incompatibilities, there's things that happen, and that's okay. I'm not blaming you for this pain. I don't believe you want to hurt me. From there, let's start discussing.
Mm.
With my long distance partner, for example, wanted to explore an open relationship on his side. And then I said, okay, yes. I said a few things that I usually need. This is all negotiable, but this is what usually helps me feel secure in the relationship. But then some other things happened in my life, very specific, that just drained all my energy, emotional, just my health took a very bad turn. I stopped seeing clients. At the moment, I have no clients. I had to stop all the processes to deal with this thing that I'm dealing with. And last Saturday, I said, this, you having other people and just exploring, because you don't know exactly what that looks like, it's making me very anxious. And it's taking a lot of energy that I don't have at the moment. So I need to talk about this to make it more secure for me. And then he said, what if I don't go out with other people, like sexually or romantically, while we do this? And I stopped and I said, but it feels like I'm controlling you and manipulating you. I can't ask you for that. And he said, I don't feel controlled. I don't feel manipulated. And I want to do this. Why don't you trust that I will tell you what I want, what I need? Which is a moment of me saying, that's true. You're not a child, and you are also an adult who can make their own choices. And you can say no if you don't like it. I want to trust your yes, so I trust your no. I also realized that a lot of people, when we talk about freedom, they very rarely talk about the freedom to decide not to do something, the freedom to decide to stop something. And so I said, okay, I would like to close the relationship again while I deal with this. It's not forever. I want you to give me a month until I see you again. During this month, I'm going to therapy with a psychiatrist. I'm going with a grief therapist. Like, I'm doing all of these things, and I will work my insecurities of our relationship in these processes. This will be my priority at the moment. And he said, yep, let's do it. And just, it was incredible.
I also think it's really always nice to hear uh, these kinds of real world examples of how we apply our ideologies and our belief systems to our relationships, right? Because it's all well and good when people are like white room theory crafting about, this is like the ethical way to do things, and then there's the reality of like, this is the real world. Shit happens, right? Like, we have struggles, we have financial issues, we have pain and suffering and loss and like all this other stuff, and like sometimes when that meets the theory, like we need to eh, act appropriately, right? And I think that at that point, that trust that you're talking about is the foundational thing that really makes that function.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Jaime.
Thank you for inviting me. I had a lot of fun.
Where can people find you online?
So people can find me, and again, my content's in Spanish, but you can find me as Gotitas de Poliamor, which means polyamory drops. But if you Google my name, you'll find me, Jaime Gama, on TikTok, on Instagram. I'm not currently taking new clients, but I do like one-off consultations in English and in Spanish. So if you need help, or you need someone to talk to about this, or you want to find a community, you can find me, and there's my Calendly thing. You can schedule a session and we can talk about it.
Well, and you can find more from me on TikTok and Instagram at Chill Polyamory, where I create and share short form videos and resources for anyone interested in non-monogamy. I've also recently started a YouTube channel where I post video essays on film and TV representations of non-monogamy, breaking that down. And I do have a Patreon where I offer bonus long form, in depth deep dives, as well as one on one peer support. So if you're looking for any additional support with non monogamy and you like me and what I have to say, chillpolyamory.com.
Thanks again so much, Jaime. It's been wonderful. And to all of our listeners, as always, just know that just because you've never done something before doesn't mean that you can't do it.
If you like the show and want to support us, you can rate and review it on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. It really helps new people find us. As well, if you want to financially help out, this show is mostly funded by patreon.com/chillpolyamory.